Welcome in. Thanks so much for joining me. So I like to discuss waking up within the world. This is a term I've heard from time to time. It's something I like. It's an idea I like. It's something I apply to my own practice. I sort of hold myself accountable to that as much as I can. And I thought to share some approaches and ideas here if it's an interesting thing for you, if it's resonating with you. So for many, many years, I think I was attempting to have a practice that where I'm learning or approaching waking up within the world, waking up within my life. I thought I was doing that, but looking back, I think I was mostly trying to avoid life. And what do I mean avoid life? I mean avoid my emotions, avoid different kinds of habit patterns, behaviors that I was struggling with, avoid challenges in relationships. And I think this is pretty common for those of us who really get inspired by an Eastern tradition, be it, Buddhism, Hindu-based traditions, Vedic traditions, Taoism. They all have these elements of practice or ways of being where we sort of leave the world. And world here is not literal. We can't literally leave the world, and I guess until we die. But, take off to a mountain, all of that, right? And, I did it for 9 years. I was a Buddhist monk, for those of you who don't know. And a good majority of those years I spent in solitary retreat alone. And it was an incredibly useful time, very beneficial. And at the same time, I do see that I was taking an approach where I was looking towards some way out from my pain, and I didn't want to deal with the pain. I just wanted to get out. Again, we all have various forms where this sort of approach enters our spiritual practice or meditation practice. So just want to encourage you to be open that might be happening, or maybe it's not. I don't know. For those of us who kind of, as I said, sort of drink the Kool-Aid and go really deep into an Eastern tradition, this can happen at some point in our journey, right? I know a lot of my friends, it's very similar. At some point we realize, I can't avoid myself. Like I can't avoid what's going on, right? And I think now there's a lot of great teachings and information on this. And some of the cultural translation just has to happen because, Buddhism, Vedic traditions, Hindu traditions, Taoism, etc. These come from cultures that tended not to dissociate from emotions as much as we do in the modern world. So there's some things there to be aware of, right? And so the way we can interpret some of the traditional teachings or the ways people went about their spiritual practice, we might have our own interpretation that actually isn't a reality of what was going on. When someone was going into a mountain retreat, they didn't necessarily feel disconnected from the world or disconnected from others, right? They felt they were in a community even though they were alone. And perhaps they really missed that community from time to time, but they would work with it. Where, I don't know, for me, in a lot of my personal and emotional struggles, I felt very disconnected from others in the world. And I think this is part of a modern dilemma a lot of us run into. And again, I have other content on that, so I'm not going to go specifically into that issue. I just wanted to name it here because if we don't become aware of that, then it's very difficult to really have a practice where we really want to engage with the world. For some of us, it's not an issue. I meet people all the time that, their practice is very much engaged with the world, their families, etc. But for those of us who really get drawn to more monastic practice and or sort of yogic traditions and yogis and yoginis who go away into the mountains and things like that, sometimes we can have this misunderstanding. So with that said, what do we mean by waking up? So this is a big idea in Buddhism, at least where I'm going to talk from. So I'm not going to be able to give it a full, I guess you could say, like a complete explanation here. And I also don't want to go too far into the weeds. But basically, what we mean by waking up is recognizing somewhat that the way we're working with our perceptions, thoughts, emotions, life, idea of who we think we are, personality, identities, etc., that there's some sort of fluidity to that we're not allowing. So waking up means entering the fluidity instead of turning things into ice, right? And one, just small example of this is, what we take self to be, right? So throughout a day, we don't recognize it because we usually don't look. But when we meditate, we're attempting to look, who do I think I am in any given moment, and how is that existing, right? So we usually identify really strongly either with our body, with a certain mood, like an emotion, or something ideological, a thought process, a belief. And sometimes these are all kind of glommed together, right? The Buddha very skillfully taught us that the body and mind could be split into something called the five heaps. And this is one way to understand that mind and body are not one lump, that they actually can break up into things that can function kind of, they all are interdependent and function together, but they're not necessarily the same thing. And so through this, we can start to recognize also how we associate maybe sometimes more with the physical, with the body, or more with something abstract, some sense of an identity somewhere. But when we really look for that, when we try to see if that is what I was saying, non-fluid, something solid, permanent, that always exists like that, we're going to find it's not the case, that it's some, self-identity, how we're identifying with a mood, all of that is changing all the time and shifting. And so it's not the same. So that means, so then it brings the question, well, who are we, right? And it brings a doubt. And this doubt is very healthy, because through doubt, this healthy doubt or healthy skepticism, like a constructive skepticism, we can start to enter into accessing awakening in the form of fluidity, right? I'm just using that term. It's not really a traditional Buddhist term, but I'm using it as a way to get out of kind of jargon, right? So Buddhism doesn't say that self doesn't exist, right? It's not saying we don't exist, but it's also not saying we exist in the way we think we do. So they use the word illusion a lot, that things exist kind of dreamlike, like a type of illusion. And that's part of the fluidity, right? When we recognize things to be arising, yet not findable, we start to enter a little more fluidity with our experience, a little more give, a little more space, right? We know how to treat things with enough care and responsibility, but also to relax, right? So I'm not saying that is the meaning of awakening. As I said, it's a deep dive to describe what awakening means in Buddhism, because we use the term Buddhahood, enlightenment, all these different terms that imply certain kinds of omniscience taking place and all of that. But nonetheless, I think something more practical for us to work with when we're approaching waking up within the world is, can we open up more fluidity in how we're identifying and holding reality to be in any given moment, whether that's with ourself, whether that's with an object we're working with, another person, a relationship. And the within the world part, again, becomes a direct engagement. It's not something for the future. It's not something transcendent where we're going to, sail up into the sky necessarily. It's just on the ground, almost kind of like, monotonous, plain. I don't want to use this word, but sometimes it's just boring, right? Just life. I find this is where the radical work takes place, right? And I don't think this is novel. It's not a novel idea. You can find a lot of people talking about this out there. But nonetheless, I just wanted to point it out because there's subtleties to this. I just want to also say this is very challenging. At least it's very challenging for me to do this because it means working with the things I don't want to work with necessarily, or working with discomfort. It means that I have to include that that I have to have a practice that includes also the things that are comfortable, but also the things that are uncomfortable. And I'm not saying this is necessarily always enjoyable, but I will say I found the richest parts of my practice here. Not saying retreat and going to the mountain and all that isn't useful. I don't want to go into extremes here. That's incredibly useful. And if we know how to do that and we're ready for that, incredibly useful. But at the same time, most of us are, householder practitioners. We have families, we have jobs, we have partners, we have friends, we have, all of this crazy world that we're engaging with on a daily basis. So why not use it within our practice, or use our practice to meet that, to meet others, ourselves, with more compassion and more skill, right? More wisdom. So the awake part has a lot to do with the cultivation of awareness. It has a lot to do with how much can we use the awareness cultivated in our formal practice as a muscle we can access throughout the day, every day. It doesn't have to be for long periods of time, just can be in short moments where we're opening to things and trying to see things more raw, more naked, meaning just seeing things as they are without the constant overlay of judgments and opinions that our mind spits out. So meditation practice, I think among the many benefits, this is one of the stronger benefits. It's something I advocate for a lot. It's extremely helpful. Of course, we suffer less because we're not always activated in our aversion or clinging, but at the same time, we're able to act more skillfully, and we're better able to navigate and apply our spiritual practice to the world, meaning to what's in front of us, right? The world just means what's around you right now. Like you're listening or watching this, what's the world? The world is your experience right now. The world is partly you listening or watching to this. It's the room around you. It's all the emotions, thoughts, arising, sensations. That's the world, right? That's your experience. And sometimes that's more complex and sometimes it's not. So what I'm advocating for is just more applying as a motivation and attitude and approach that I want to wake up within the world, and I want to do that through learning to meet even the simple, monotonous experiences of my day, learning to meet even the ones that are uncomfortable throughout my day. And as I usually advocate for, we don't go for the most challenging thing first. What I recommend when you're working with including discomfort in your practice, being open to that and working with that through awareness and somatic awareness in different practices, is more taking on the small things that you wouldn't think matter that much, meaning like it's a small enough discomfort, you don't really care that much about it. It's sort of uncomfortable, like a slight body ache or a headache or, I don't know, like just a kind of sort of bad mood, but you're not having a huge emotional explosion at the moment, just a kind of, you didn't sleep so well, something like that. Take that into the path. And it's through these very small things that we actually learn to work with more challenging things. And of course, these small things add up. When you add up 5 or 10 of these smaller annoyances, they add up into a big one, right? And then, of course, as we know, in our relationships, often our conflicts with others are influenced by how we're feeling, the moods we're in, right? That compounds how we interact with someone. So these kinds of things are good to start taking into our path. And again, not treating them like, I don't know how to say it, like it's too easy. No, I'm advocating for working with the easy things, please. Why not? And that's how we begin to work with things that are more challenging, right? So just to wrap it up, just to recap, awakening is a big idea. I encourage you to, if you really want to understand it, study the Dharma. If you're interested in Buddha Dharma, it's a very rich topic. I think this question of even what is awakening, what is enlightenment, it sort of informs our path and informs how we expand or grow on our spiritual path in Buddha Dharma. So it's a question we're continually asking because, enlightenment is not something you could say as that or this, or even, you can't even really word it, right? It's beyond concept. But nonetheless, as we familiarize ourselves with our mind and humanity and comfort and discomfort and all of it and emotions, we start to understand through Dharma, through study, through practice, through understanding, etc., the difference, right, between unawake and awake. And that starts to become more clear. But usually in Buddha Dharma, awakening is a process. Sometimes there are teachings on a sudden awakening, things like that. But for the majority of people, it's gradual. It's a process, which is actually really useful. But just to recap the way I talked about it, about finding more fluidity, right? Finding more fluidity in relationship to our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, how we interact with others, finding more curiosity, openness, ways to not get stuck and start to turn our reactions into ice, right? So we can start to pursue that as an aspiration through our meditation, through our awareness practice, and then bring it into the world, bring it into our daily life. I think that's something that is doable and approachable for a lot of us. And then as we study the Dharma more, especially the teachings on non-duality, on shunyata, we can start to bring in an understanding and a richer practice of how to work with the nature of reality. So I think that's all I want to say on this topic. Thanks so much. If you are enjoying this, please let me know. You can always reach out at my website at scotttusa.com. If you're watching on YouTube, I really appreciate a comment. If you are listening on another channel, Spotify, etc., again, feel free to reach out to me. Wishing you well in this. I find this very challenging, but very rewarding. So I'd love to hear how it's going for you, your practice in the world with the world. Okay, thanks so much.